Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm David Shaw, the Publishing Director for Family Business Magazine, and I'm so very glad that you could join us. I hope that you and your family members are all well. The end of the year is fast approaching, and that means not only the holidays, but also increased pressure to manage equity events, gifting decisions, and governance planning. What you do or don't do now may have long term unintended consequences. Today's webinar is going to look at those end of year issues through the lens of an active embedded family office that is working on planning these very things in real time. We'll look first at understanding exactly what an embedded family office is, and then at how to use structured governance to avoid overburdening the family office staff at year end. And then we'll outline what those key year end tasks are, and finally discuss some gifting and succession best practices. It's an awful lot to go through, but I think you'll enjoy this one. Before we begin, some of our quick housekeeping details. If you haven't joined us before, we welcome your questions and especially your thoughts and comments throughout the session. Just use the Ask a Question bar down below the screen that you see there. We'll go for no more than 60 minutes today and get to as many questions and comments as we can. So joining me for today's discussion are Aaron Smith and Graham McConnell. Aaron is the Senior Family Office Manager at Vermeer Corporation and serves as a primary conduit between the family shareholders and the company concerning governance, education, communication, and next-gen development. Vermeer has a unique embedded family office approach that I think you'll enjoy learning about. Aaron is going to be led in conversation by Graham McConnell, who is the CEO and co-founder of Nth Round. Before Nth Round, Graham served as product owner for Relay Network, managing priorities for a team of software developers and test engineers. Had the pleasure of working with Graham multiple times before, and I'm glad to work with him again. Welcome, both of you. Graham, I will leave things to you to get started with this, and I will be back with questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, David, and thanks to the entire family business team for hosting this. And also thank you to Aaron for being here. I want to start just by, I know that David gave a little bit of a background on you, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. And I think you probably know why I'm asking these questions. I've been lucky to visit Vermeer and see the absolutely stunning facilities that you have here. The plant, it's at a scale that is really hard for me to put into words. So I'm hoping that you can maybe put that into words a little bit, but also your career and how you went from growing up kind of in your dad being at Vermeer, and then you found your way back to Vermeer. And to me, every time I hear you describe it, it feels like you're building your own legacy, within the company, which is really, really cool. So I know that's a lot, but hoping that maybe you can just give some background on all of that.
Yeah, appreciate it. And thank you, Graham, for leading me today in conversation. And thank you, David, as well, and the Family Business Magazine team for all your work in organizing this. As Graham was kind of describing there, Vermeer Corporation, we're an industrial and agricultural manufacturer, largely based in Pella, Iowa, about 40 miles southeast of Des Moines, and have about 4,500 worldwide team members. The company was started 76 years ago by Gary Vermeer, kind of a very unique innovator and tinkerer. Invented the large round hay baler, was his kind of claim to fame back in the early 70s. And then really accelerated some growth in the early 90s with the advent of horizontal directional drilling. That lays typically a lot of the infrastructure for water lines, fiber optic, any kind of infrastructure in neighborhoods, and really allows folks to not disturb the top of the ground. And so that's been incredible as we get into all the advent of technology and such the last kind of 25-ish years in that. And so we are, as Graham and everyone in this call is likely with a family enterprise, we have 80 total family members. 67 or 68 of those members are shareholders. And so that is an interesting job of mine. And I very much enjoy kind of helping them through every stage of life. We actually just had a couple newborns here 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so excited to add to the family member tally there. And as Graham was kind of alluding to as well, my own personal journey is a little bit interesting. I grew up here in Pella, Iowa. My father served as general counsel for Premier Corporation for 27 years. And so actually when the family group is a little bit smaller, his role would have encompassed largely what I do in the estate planning side of things and just helping kind of facilitate a lot of those conversations. And so ever the good lawyer, he did not share any of that with me while I was growing up. And so it was an interesting journey there. But I knew what the company stood for, how they treated the community, team members, suppliers, everybody in their circle. And so I've understood the value of the company and the value of it remaining family held. And so it's been a pleasure of mine to nearly the last 2 years kind of lead the family office here and help help the family as we get to expand our fourth generation offerings. As we've got 80 family members, and a lot of those G4s are starting to come of age here in their 20s and late teens. And so I get to help facilitate a lot of unique conversations, and it's an enjoyable time for me.
Yeah, that's great, and I love that story. As you know, I also work with my dad, and so it's I know that you obviously didn't work there at the same time, but actually I've been wondering this. Ryan Agri, did he overlap with your dad at all, or no?
So Ryan did indeed overlap with my father for about 10 or 12 years here at Vermeer. And then in an even smaller world, as many folks probably on the call know, that Pella, Iowa is home to not just one, but two fairly large family enterprises. And so Ryan actually had some significant experience over at Pella Corporation. They make very nice windows. And so it's an interesting town that I think, Graham, you've gotten to know fairly well. And we are, at times, it feels like the center of the family enterprise world.
I can understand that, definitely. So I'm thinking back to when we kind of first were introduced to Vermeer, and I remember being actually at a family business conference and meeting Ryan. And at that point in time, this was, I think, a year before we even started working together, but he was describing to me some of the I guess you could call it digital transformation, basically, or transformation generally of the family office. And the one thing that was top of mind that we eventually, ended up building a solution together with you, which we are grateful for that opportunity, was around cost basis and going through the process of going back in time to the beginning and figuring out what is the cost basis, or how has that changed as shares have changed hands. And so I think that kind of leads us nicely into the topic of, how family offices evolve over time. And it's been an interest of mine recently, getting to talk to different families that are in different stages of that process. And, we see some people that I think are a single individual that are very overburdened by the questions that are being, or the tasks that are being put on their plate. But then we also see organizations like Vermeer, which I think are have done a fantastic job of creating an embedded family office. So if you don't mind, maybe you can talk a little bit about what are the roles of the family office at Vermeer, and kind of what's expected, and how have you got to this point? Yeah.
No, our governance and the evolution of the family office has been a journey, and I guess that would be the first place I would start, is that it is a journey, and to start it is frankly the hardest part, and so we've frankly, I think a lot of people probably on this call, or certainly David with Family Business Magazine, was integral to the Vermeer family's adoption of a lot of best practices. And so the family really started in the late 90s, early 2000s, of attending a lot of conferences and hearing, how should we organize our company and be aware of that three-circle model that so many of us are familiar with. And so how's, our governance structure, knowing that we would like to perpetuate the family ownership of the operating company, and to really separate what tend to be emotional decisions into a far more logical framework. And so a lot of that hard work was done by Heidi Vermeer Quist and Ryan probably 12 to 14 years ago, where we finally separated out kind of that, we call it an ownership council. A lot of folks call it family councils. And so that's, for lack of a better term, that's our kind of board of the family. And that is separate and distinct from the board of the business. And so that's very intentional. We try to house those more emotional, what could be dramatic conversations in that board of the family. And so that it is not trying to affect the other side. And our family office is largely organized around the governance of that ownership council. We've got two main committees, an education committee and a governance committee. Those two flow out of that ownership council. So ownership council gives a mandate on kind of what the purpose and scope is of what they're looking for, any goals that they would like to achieve with regards to that strategy, and then let those committees carry it out. Us in the family office, it's myself and three others. We carry out and execute on those plans, working with the family members that are members of those committees. And so that largely is how we're structured. We also do, a large portion of my day-to-day is spent kind of liaising with estate planning attorneys, accountants, tax advisors, all the fun stuff that I think many of the folks on this call probably know and love. We don't have any in-house councils or tax councils on that front. And so a lot of that's farmed out. I find myself translating a lot in between. And so that's the choice the family has made. That may evolve. And we are, as we move down into the G3s and G4s, I think my vision for the future would be that probably does not remain the same. So back to the kind of question at hand, it is for certain a journey and one that evolves as the family's needs evolve.
Yeah. Is to take that last example there of estate planning attorneys, is there do you have go-to firms or people that you direct people to that kind of already have the context of how the business is structured, or are people free to go out and select their own? I guess kind of, is there a process for connecting people, and then having that, whatever comes out of those conversations comes back to you, presumably?
We have a preferred provider list of a couple. And again, those folks have long-standing history with many of the family, going back decades. And so that's incredibly helpful, both from a just prudent understanding perspective of the estate planning attorneys know the folks in the business and are very comfortable with where and how the business is doing. Though there is no actual mandate from the family office to state that those are the only providers that they are able to use. That would be probably something that, to be candid, my guess is that would be something that we may be putting in place here at some point.
Gotcha.
We would only like for you to work with two or three. That because frankly, it's been difficult for me to filter all that communication. Right. With now 80 family members, that grows exponentially every time. Yeah, makes sense. So as it relates to equity, which is of particular interest to me, so I know that when we first started working together, you had another system in place, which is great. We work with a lot of companies that are coming from Excel or even paper, which makes it very hard to digitize. As we look towards the end of the year, what we see generally is that a lot of transactions take place, at the year end. Do you see something similar? Is there an advantage to having the estate planning kind of take place at the end of the year in batches? There certainly are, and I think as you inputted our record number of transactions, I think into your system, that you probably noticed a pattern. We try, frankly, a lot actually at the beginning of the calendar year to do a lot of those annual exclusion gifting type pieces. We send out a memo to each of the families stating that, hey, here's the gift exemption for the year, and here's the number of shares we think that are adequate to fill that up. And so we get, I don't know, 50-ish% of folks that probably do annual gifting in that period. And then there's probably the other 50% that do it in the last week of December. And so that's never the perfect time, but and I'm sure, as everybody on the call is well aware too, next year, and 12/31/2025 is a pretty big date in the estate planning world, and we're doing everything we can to avoid doing a lot of work in December of 25. So trying to push those conversations as quick as we can, but knowing that family members move at different speeds, and some people just have different needs and circumstances. Things change, but I think, to your point too, it is why we saw the need to go with a more digital solution, was just frankly recognizing that our trust structure and everything around that was only going to exponentially grow. So with 80 family members, we've got 120-ish trusts, and I assume that number becomes 200 before it becomes smaller. And so we just knew that the Excel system we had in place, and along with the other system, was just not going to be sustainable. And so this was your guys' solution was a unique one that we thought also could grow with us as our needs probably change and grow here over the next couple decades. And so it's an exciting time, and your team has been absolutely fabulous to work alongside.
Well, I appreciate you saying all that. Oh, David's
Just a quick question. Do you have formal buy-sell arrangements or agreements? And what can you explain kind of how buying and selling? First of all, how do you value the equity? And then what can family members do with it?
Yeah, okay. We do. And that, to David's point, that was actually one of my goals in my role this year, was to get in place 100% of the shareholders into a buy-sell agreement. So can proudly state that we were able to achieve that this year. Unlike many probably family businesses on this call, or certainly ones I know Graham is used to dealing with in the private equity world, we actually do not have many purchase events. And our buy-sell actually is very limited, and in the number of on the number of occasions that would be possible. And so it's really what we do in our share transfer regime is simply the prudent estate planning and trust planning that the family members are wanting to do. And so there's actually, I think it's on a number of single digit times where we've had liquidity events essentially in the company, and so there are purchase events, and so that's, while that I think is good in a lot of respects, it also creates some interesting transaction history for Graham and his team to input, and for us and my staff to help facilitate when we do plan.
Yeah, I have found no two buy-sell agreements look the same, or not even close, actually. I think I was telling you that I was on site last week with a window manufacturer, not Pella, but another one, and they have actually quite a strict system in place where, if by age 33 you're not employed, you or your spouse are not employed by the company, that triggers a sale event. And then even beyond that, there are some rules around, the shares should first be available to the people in their in their branch of the tree. But if there's not enough demand amongst those other members, then it goes out to the wider audience. And so anyway, I think it's probably, it's nice that you've not had to kind of make those kinds of strict restrictions on who is an eligible shareholder. But are there other things that come to mind for you, like of what makes an eligible shareholder? And I'm sure it's all laid out in the buy-sell agreement, but one of the problems
we've got a couple kind of odd rules on, and we've got, our, I guess, equity structure is voting and non-voting shares there. Only bloodline folks can handle those voting shares. And then there's actually a branch of the family that has an addendum to the buy-sell agreement where any of their married ends can actually not hold either voting or non-voting shares. And so that obviously limits some of those folks' ability to plan or our maneuvers to execute any estate planning work there. So it's a difficult item to kind of work around, and then it's not everybody's sort of equal. That's our the interesting piece about the family on the whole is that their desire really is to hold the operating company and perpetuate that down to G4s, G5s, G6s. And so it is Ryan and the kind of history of the family office was really to get them to see that those shares are really not a financial asset. They're far more of an emotional asset. And that presents a different set of issues for us in the family office, but is probably much different than I'm certain most of many other family businesses on the call.
Yeah. If we go back to the digitization of the family office, you know, I know that you have systems in place that allow family members to communicate amongst each other, trusted family being one of them. But in terms of their interface with the company, I mean, that's predominantly you and Ryan and Molly, right? So they pick up the phone and they talk to you directly. I know that you also are in the process of digitizing stock certificates, and maybe you're done at this point. And so that's been another thing that kind of comes to mind is, you have this piece of paper that has a lot of emotional value to it, but it becomes a bit of a headache as those pieces of paper get, put into 80 different drawers somewhere, and it's hard to, let's say they decide they now want to gift those shares, having to redeem those, find them, and then reissue, new stock certificates. So yeah, I mean, maybe talk me through a little bit about that process of kind of digitizing and how that's made a difference.
Yeah, no, it's made a massive difference. And to your point, we utilize Trusted Family quite a bit to communicate to the whole family group and to really make certain that everyone receives the same communication and at the same time. And so that was an important, we did a couple posts out to the family and also an in-person update. We hold an annual family camp every year for as much of the family as possible as can get together every mid-July. And so I took that opportunity to kind of dive down into what our move to uncertificated shares and your system was going to mean for them, and kind of laid out that while we very much respect that emotional hold and value that folks place on that certificate, that it's very difficult with the number of shares we have and then just the geographic spread of the family to be able to help facilitate that in any kind of logical and accurate way. And so the move to this has been wonderful. We got buy-in fairly quickly after that session. Everybody across the family submitted their old hard copy certificates, and Molly did a wonderful job of integrating all that information, making certain that we had all that accounted for and audited. And then your system is awesome, and it allows actually the family members to produce a replica certificate if they still want that. So I feel like everybody's kind of in a win-win here, and it's certainly going to make our life easier as we start November 1 here, transferring a lot more shares. So.
Well, I sincerely feel like the credit is shared because you came to us with this challenge, this opportunity, and we've since had a bunch of other families come to us with the same kinds of needs, and so we see it as a really great partnership because you don't want to build software without a real use case in mind, and you led us in the right direction there, and so very, very grateful for that. So I was going to also ask, so when this gifting takes place, cost basis is associated with it. And right now, that's something that you and Molly, I think, are owning. Is someone picks up the phone and says, I'd like to give some equity to my, some shares to my kids, and can you help me walk through this? And what's the most tax efficient way to do that? We've thought about actually, and we have a customer now that's saying to us, can we expose that form, to even make it simpler? Can we say, fill out this form, tell us which tranches, for lack of a better word, of equity we want to transfer. Is that something that you think will eventually be the direction? Is even stepping away from those phone calls that I'm sure you field daily? Are there cleaner interfaces that you can have so that people don't have to fully understand the buy-sell agreement, but can use software to get the things done that they want to get done?
No, I certainly hope that we get there, because to your point, it's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
I think those calls, and also while we have been, I think, blessed with the trust that the family has placed in us to make certain that we are providing that most efficient answer on which shares to transfer. That's certainly giving them, I think, more power and clout to do that. Would never be a bad thing. And as the family starts to continue to spread geographically across the country and the world, that my guess is just only going to be more important, given that I can only field so many phone calls in a day.
So I'm thinking now a little bit about the audience here and kind of the various stages that they're at. If they're at the very early stages of forming their family office, who do you think should be in charge of year-end planning and all of this estate planning, related activities that go on? Is it one person? Is it an outside help like you've talked about? For that earlier stage, what would you suggest is who owns this?
Yeah, I'm going to give the wonderful answer of it depends, probably, and be deferential to that. But no, I think having at least my guess is that this tends to lie with the CFO and general counsel quite a bit at a company level, and certainly did in the evolution of Vermeer's. And that's where 25-ish years ago, that would have been where we were at. Was largely, this would have been my father as general counsel, and Mr. Van Dusseldorp as our CFO back then, would have been working hand in hand with that. Though again, largely it would have been with outside counsel at kind of their direction, because while my father loved trust and estates, was not, that was not his only practice area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having a clear direction on forming that family office, and that truly, we actually just went through a continuous improvement event a couple weeks ago as a family office staff, and really identified, along with the family, that understanding the purpose and scope of what the family office is a very important point, and one that likely evolves, right? I don't believe that the purpose and scope of the family office is the same as it was when we moved into this space 8 years ago, and wasn't the same as when they formed the concept back in 2008 or 9. And so those things have to evolve, and the family ultimately has to give us direction on how they want us to kind of help execute. But we can certainly, I think, provide some good answers, and have been blessed with them trusting where we've, I think, led them here over the course of the last decade and a half.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool to hear about that evolution. I maybe changing topics a little bit and thinking ahead. Are there areas that you're currently focused on evolving? I know that one area that we are working on together is proxy voting and digitizing that piece of it. You know, or you know, is that really top of mind, or are the things even beyond that you're thinking about in terms of the next evolution?
For sure, it's I think largely that our proxy voting, and then also our education of the next gen, really getting to understand what it means to be a beneficiary and a trustee of what they're going to inherit here fairly quickly, and making certain that all those solutions or avenues for education are digital in nature. Because while most of our G2s grew up here in Pella and knew it well, that is not the case for the G4s. And so that's just the reality of what we, need for them to understand what they're inheriting. And yet they do not have the same kind of common upbringing and location. And it makes whatever time then that they're able to spend with us in the family office, or with their parents or outside advisors, talking about these things, that every minute of those conversations is more fruitful if we can get them to understand things a little bit better. So we're working with another family business, Tamarind Learning, and their online platform to go through a lot of stewardship pieces there, and then trustee and beneficiary basics there for a lot of our 21 up to 33. We're going to have a cohort go through that. So excited to see what that does. And
relevant question to that next gen education, Aaron. At what age do the youngest family members get stock? At what point can they be gifted? Is it dependent on the family branch?
So it is ultimately up to the family, and frankly, there's we've got babies that hold shares, or their minors trust does, and so there's no restriction there. And then when the family members turn 18 is when we start conversations about folding them into kind of the adult assembly, is what we call it. And so they'll get orientation of our governance structure, or the family mission and value statement, all of that. And prior to age 18, they're going through things, learning that. At family camp, we do activities that try and draw out the values of the family, what the corporation's about, what our products do, all sorts of things in that nature, but it's not real formal per se until that 18 age range.
And just another follow-up question, Graham, if I could.
Absolutely.
That evolution of the Vermeer family office is really fascinating, because essentially it's an embedded family office, but you have a separate family office staff, which keeps can you talk about that a little bit? When did that occur? Because usually an embedded family office causes the CFO of the corporation to go mildly insane while trying to be, the business CFO as well as the family CFO. And that's a lot of reason why people launch single family offices. So in a sense, you're a single family office embedded within the corporation, correct? Can you talk that through?
Yep. Nope. And that certainly, I know, would have been the case, back even 25-ish years ago. We would have, my father and our CFO would have been tearing their hair out on occasion with some of those conversations. And so the need was clear. And as Gary Vermeer had stated back in the day, there's, I'm going to find a better way. And that certainly was what Bob Vermeer and then Mary Andringa saw it when they started attending quite a few conferences and saw the need to build out a formal family office. And so the family office was sort of separated from those positions back formally in 2014. We had staff members that then started to have separate roles at that point, and really carve out family office specific pieces there. A lot of those folks were support staff for would have been Bob and Mary, would have been the CEO and chair at the time. And so we moved over there, and then we opened a physical office space that is separate, where we sit in the corporate building, but have a separate office space here. And that opened in 2016. And so that's, I think, really helped the family be able to separate those in their mind, and then also for us, I think have more controlled interactions maybe with the business side, which I know the business and a lot of the folks over there appreciate that, because while the family is wonderful people, that on occasion it's nice to have a controlled interaction with that. So it's been a fun evolution to see that, and that I think back to David's point, that really has allowed our finance teams and our legal teams to really focus on the business of the business and not have any overlap onto the family side.
Yeah, I think the separation is really cool and probably creates a lot of efficiencies so that the office of the CFO for Vermeer can focus on what's important to the business, and you can focus on the family and all of that, equally important but also quite separate functions there. I think it's also says a lot about how the company has done over time too, because you kind of need enough scale to get to the point where that separation of duties is really justified, and the company has done very well, obviously, and so that I think is maybe in the back of people's minds as they're thinking when is the right time to make that separation. I did want to, something that you were mentioning earlier about age differences kind of got me thinking, or reminded me of something that we spend a lot of time thinking about is, if you have shareholders of all ages trying to use the same system, it can be challenging. And so, yes, the younger generations I think are very good at picking up, on all of this very quickly. But then you still have, older generations that like to do things the way they've always been done. And so, we spend a lot of time thinking about like, what is the home of, of these younger shareholders, these younger family members? Where do they go as like their home base for the company? Because it is such a large part of their identity. Yeah, I think it's interesting how it's very different for different age groups.
It is, and we have I think we have a very wide breadth of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of our older generation are, I think they're actually going to find the move very interesting to your system, and to really visualize for them what how many trusts they have and are attached to, and then two, the value of those, because that's just not something that we have traditionally visualized. I think they know it, and certainly when they attend the annual shareholder meeting and get the business update, that I think they're thinking of that, but it'll be a powerful tool to put in their hands to really visualize what do you have here, and then a wonderful tool to visualize to their gifting strategy down to their kids and grandkids and beyond. I think that is a powerful tool to give them the ability to do that at the dinner table and to kind of have a conversation if they've got kids that are coming of age, or maybe it's their children that are in 30s and 40s, and to say, hey, this was how your grandfather did this, and why I've continued to gift in this certain way, and tell that story of that legacy is a unique way, I think, for us to help facilitate that conversation, and one that I hope gets a more holistic understanding of truly what they have been doing and passing those shares.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned these regular learning forums that you host, and I feel very lucky to be able to be a small part of that in a couple of weeks. Can you tell me a little bit more about what are the topics there, and how are those topics determined? How do you set up the agenda for those learning forums?
Yeah, so those learning forums came out of an education committee. So our ownership council has those two large committees, education and governance. And education identified an online learning forum as a good conduit for there to be an item of importance out to the family, and to try and hold those. We hold one in the fall and one in the spring, and try to do that every year. And those topic areas can range from we had what do we have? A piece on how our dealers support disaster relief. So unfortunately, a very topical conversation right now, and praying for all the folks in Florida that hopefully make it out of this storm on the better side. And so we had one of our guys, our dealers in Maryland, talk through his process of ordering equipment after a storm, sourcing that possibly from other dealers, if all that didn't work out, and then how a lot of their customers end up being the first responders in after a storm and cleaning up the streets and whatever. And so we were trying to tie the importance of what our products do, and try to get our younger generation to understand that. And then that also gets them to understand what our distribution network is for the products that we do. And so try to tie in a little bit of business stuff with some good legacy there. And so education committee also created a worksheet along with that, so a little bit of homework for the kids to follow along in that discussion. So that was wonderful. My guess is many folks on this call probably aware of the Corporate Transparency Act too, and the changes there. And I think that'll be a quick end of year learning forum too for us to make certain that everybody's aware of that and has worked with their legal and tax advisors to get that in hand.
Yeah.
So it's honestly that it's education committee's kind of job to figure that out, and then we carry it out this year. And I am very appreciative of you and your team's help and in building out that learning forum here in a couple of weeks. It will be a change of pace, because we're going to change up how the folks are going to do proxy voting this year. And so with our annual shareholder meeting and vote in early December, we figured it was a good time, 6-ish weeks before that, to get them familiar with the system, have you guys present on how that system is going to look and work, and answer any questions that they'd have on that front.
Yeah. I think there are certain times when, at least when we find that rolling out a new system like this makes a lot of sense. Proxy voting, like you mentioned, is one of them, but also around annual shareholder meetings, or even those like learning forums that you mentioned, places where the family is already being brought together. And it also provides a good time for us to get feedback. What do family members want to see out of this? And so, we feel like we're very lucky to be kind of an extension of your team and learn from all the experience and feedback that we get from you. I think I've actually driven by that dealer in Maryland that you mentioned.
Yeah, Mark Boyle out at Vermeer Allroads does a great job. And if
Yeah.
you need a chipper out on the East Coast in the DC area, give him a call.
Yeah. So I think I've gotten through a lot of what I wanted to ask you, but I wonder, David, are there other questions that have come up?
There are quite a few, actually. So, Aaron, can you, if it's not confidential, can you share more about how you do the gifting, how the family does gifting through the trusts and so on? What are some of the strategies that you use?
Yeah, and so each nuclear family does it a little bit differently and has different needs, and so. I'm working on a couple things for some family. A lot of folks have SLATs, Spousal Lifetime Access Trust, and so we've gone through some different strategies there of gifts to a spouse that then will wait 6 or 8 months and then set up a SLAT there for their benefit, then probably fill that hole with the chance of, if that spouse passes, the other spouse loses access to that income. Fill that with the life insurance trust, commensurate policy there. Many folks also have a lot of GST trusts for the benefit of their grandkids, and again, with back to the family's intent to hold the operating company, that would seem to align very well with that. We've also got a couple folks that have in a branch of the family that has a dynasty trust. That's set up in a pretty unique way. It's a little bit interesting, and actually just had a G1 pass away last year that is going to necessitate a split of that dynasty trust onto the second level there. And so it's honestly, we try to respond to the needs of each family. And there has been, Gary Vermeer, I mentioned back at the beginning, Harry, his brother, was also integral to the business early on. Those brothers had a split back in the 70s. And so there had been a difference of opinion about how to treat those. And so traditionally we've maybe had two different sort of regimes there about how to pass shares, but ultimately working with two different firms to execute quite a bit of planning and trying to respond mostly to whatever those the family members want with respect to that. Sorry, it probably can't get incredibly specific.
Right. But do all shares transfer from trust to trust or through trust? So there's no external, internal market?
Correct. Yep. And so, Graham's system is that internal market, but we have a very small number of events that would qualify as a purchase event for us. And then that's, again, the intention is the family has desired to keep a lot of the shares in their family line and don't want them to get out. And so that's largely what our buy-sell agreement then follows, is a lot of that ethos. And so, frankly, there have been, I think, 6 events over the course of the last 50 years where shares were bought back at some point and changed hands in ways that now would not be possible.
Got it. Okay. Are shareholders also compensated with dividends, or are those dividends put through the trust, or how does the dividend thing work?
Indeed. So that's switching my hat to sort of the business side of things.
Right.
We've got a board of the business. That board's a +1 independent board, in keeping with best practice. And so have 5 truly independent directors there. Wonderful people that we've been lucky enough to have serve for us. And then 4 family members. One of those family member seats is reserved for the CEO slot. And then we have 3 shareholder directors, is what we term that. They go through a rigorous development process there, as judged by the ownership council, that give them a development plan. And so we try to have the family members that serve on the board to take that as seriously as we believe it's worth. The board has a dividend policy that we pay a certain percentage of profits out at the end of the year. Those typically flow to trust. There's a few people that still hold shares personally, and so it would go to them personally too. But all that flows through our structure. And while we are not using Graham's system to pay dividends here, I know his system can through ACH capabilities, and so that may be something we explore. Just didn't want to add one more piece to an already busy year.
Got it.
Actually, a quick follow-up there. Do you separate other separate accounts to pay taxes on those dividends, or is that up to the family members to track themselves?
Ultimately, up to the family members. There's a few. We've got a few South Dakota trusts, and so the trust company up there that we utilize withholds that and helps us get that back to the family very easily. But ultimately, up to the family members.
Got it.
So how do you feel? This question says philosophically, how do you think about trading off that tailored approach for each family member versus something consistent for all? If you prioritize uniqueness, how do you scale things, or do you just deal with it?
We've been at the just deal with it stage
Okay.
for a bit. And I appreciate that question because that's kind of what I probably have a few less hairs than when I started the job a while back. But that is, I think, frankly, something that we're going to have to clarify with the family here over the next little bit and really understand that as a lot of these things have grown and just the sheer number of people and trust that we have, how is that going to look? And ultimately, we can't get back to the cat was out of the bag, right? When first sort of difference started, and so we'll never get back to square one. But I think we may be able to get to a place where we say we're gonna, if I'm going to help the family, it's going to be through 2 or 3 providers, and they're going to likely push these things and preferences for it. And so my guess is that that's where we head, but ultimately that'll be up to the family, and we'll see whether or not my tack is taken there.
Okay, interesting. And you had mentioned the relationship, with the board and the board setting the dividend and so on. But are there regular meetings with the family office and the leadership team of the company outside of that? And if so, what is the relationship between both teams like?
It is pretty close, and that's happened probably more naturally because of, as Graham had mentioned, Ryan Agri was the family office director prior to my role, and he also serves as our CFO, and so he was in constant communication, obviously,
With himself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct, and the rest of the team,
Right.
and we try to have in our ownership council, frankly, and the board have lunches, and those meetings are also staggered at the same time. So we do quarterly ownership council meetings the same week and same day as the board. And so we hold a lunch. And so those folks are communicating constantly. I'm in communication quite a bit with Ryan, with our general counsel, with others on the business side. And then our board of the business also has a nominations and governance committee. There are 2 seats reserved on there, one for the ownership council chair that we have, who's always a family member, and then a seat for myself, the family office lead. And so we will go in, give updates on what the ownership council is doing, any updates with regard to estate planning that they may need to know about. Luckily, that's been a pretty small risk, and so to the family's credit, they've done a good job of planning, so that hasn't had to be a big item, but could be. And so those are the sources, I guess, of communication we use for that and the conduit there. Hopefully that makes some sense.
It does indeed. A quick shift of thinking here. Does the Vermeer Family Office influence the Vermeer Charitable Foundation? Or I guess the better way of putting it is, are these completely separate? Is charitable giving separate from what you're doing, or is that part of the remit?
So charitable giving is certainly separate from the company. And then actually in my role as in the family office, I help the Charitable Foundation they have a separate financial advisor for their investment account, a separate board of directors, obviously for that foundation. And so I help as needed, I guess, on that front. But and actually our executive director sits in my office space as well over here. So it's maybe not as separate as it may seem, but it is the family office helps take care of anything that the foundation may need, I guess, if that's a satisfactory answer there.
Okay. Well, then you mentioned something that kind of takes us into, what other services does the family office provide to family members, which is a question here, as well as, do you manage other investments for family members outside of their trusts and so on? It sounds to me like you do.
So that actually we don't directly. So we do not actually directly manage any outside investments for the family. I am alongside a lot of the family at a lot of meetings with their financial advisors. We utilize a group in Des Moines that we've got longstanding family history with. And so I, for lack of a better word, a lot of translator. A lot of times between what the family's desires are, those advisors aren't always available when the family members are available. So help kind of translate any conversations that may happen outside of an email thread or outside of the typical updates that those folks have time for. So it's a lot of switching different hats, but a very fun and humbling role for me to serve in.
So are those investment advisors like the Des Moines company, or is that part of that group of sort of the ideal approved providers? Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you provide other kinds of services? Family offices sometimes provide concierge services, tax planning, bill pay, things like that, or is that outsourced or up to the family?
Most of that is outsourced. We do provide a few concierge pieces, and mostly it's in relation to folks that are local in Pella.
Okay.
And so again, as the family has spread geographically, I think that may change a lot of the view about, is that fair, for folks that are outside of Pella. And
Right.
so that's top of mind, I think, for the ownership council to sort of dictate, what truly is the mission of the family office and what are we willing to get into and not get into.
That's
So
great.
it is as unique as each family is. I think that's the line that I've heard, I know, in the family business community, is if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office.
And if you've seen the Vermeer family office, you've seen like 25 different iterations of how you're providing services, right? So interesting. Okay, so Graham, any last comments? Aaron, any last comments?
I just want to thank Aaron. As you just said, I know that you are wearing a lot of hats and you've got a very busy schedule. So we really appreciate you taking the time. And it's been really fun working with you over the last couple of years. So thank you for everything.
Thank you all. And it's been, it's a wonderful community to be a part of, and truly couldn't do it without folks like Graham, with you, David, and with everybody associated with the community. I know we have learned far more in the family enterprise community than I think is possible to absorb. But it's truly a labor of love, and it's a wonderful community to be a part of. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Aaron, because Vermeer has always been a company in our experience that's willing to share what it's done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and that helps other family businesses. And Graham, I thank you so much for pulling this together, because it's been a very edifying conversation. A lot of great questions from the audience. I hope all of you out there enjoyed this, and I know that I did. So with that, I'm going to switch over and kind of end this session. Going to come up here and just say, if you're interested in working on more issues related to family offices, year-end planning, all of that, join us at Transitions Fall out in California next month. You can go ahead and click or scan that QR code and find out more about this. But in the meantime, I wish all of you a wonderful holiday season ahead, whether you're doing year-end planning, gifting to trusts, any of the other things that need to be done. I hope you'll have time to enjoy with your family as well. This is, after all, family business. So with that, I thank all of you for joining us. We'll see you at the next webinar.